Welcome back to the program. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Liberals have finally dumped net zero by 2050. Here were the leaders today.
We are not pursuing net zero. We are pursuing energy affordability and emissions reduction.
We'll go with a mandate for the Australian people, and that is how we will set our national determined
And before I go to the next question.
So it looks like the coalition is indeed intact for now. Nationals leader David Littleproud applauded the decision. Here's what he said.
The Liberal Party has shown great maturity and leadership to the extent of where the National Party put forward a cheaper, better, fairer plan that doesn't walk away from actually addressing climate change.
But, you know, is this now enough to salvage Susan Lee's leadership? Is she the one to take this policy to the public between now and an election? Right now, I'm not so sure. I do think she did well today at that press conference. She battled against ridiculous and biased questions from journalists. But the fight really does start now. Joining me to discuss this and more is National Senator Ross Cadell and former Labor advisor Darren Barnett. Hi to both of you. Thanks so much for joining me on the show tonight. Ross, we'll start with you. You must be pleased that the Liberals came to this decision today.
Oh, absolutely. The last thing we want is more division in this going on. I think it's a good decision. I think they've gone out and said where they are. We can certainly get a bit of nuance going forward as we come together and talk about our policies and go forward. But what it means is now we can prosecute the argument that this is a ridiculous execution of policy by the government. If I'd come to you 3.5 years ago and come to the Australian people and said, got this great plan, I'm going to charge you $30 billion, I'm going to raise your energy bills by $1,000 and we're going to achieve no emissions reductions, which is essentially what they've done. No matter what you called, you'd think I was an idiot. Well, why are we going to back that? Because that's exactly what happened, and now we can start prosecuting the failure of this government.
Well, look, the sell starts now, and it's an everyday sell between now and the next election. So, Darren, let's just talk about this first before we go into the sell. So they're scrapping net zero, but they're staying in the Paris Agreement. How much do you think that this is political to try and maybe appease the moderates within the party, appease the Teal seats? Do you think it will have even any scrap of difference?
I don't think it will have a huge electoral difference right now. It might in the future if there's a fig leaf required to change direction again on policy. And you can change direction. You're allowed to go, you can take a GST to an election or not. You can change your position, you can do. And so who's to say in 3 or 6 years' time the position from the coalition on climate change might change and they might need the Paris Agreement to legitimise that. That's okay. What happened today is okay, but there's a few things. The Teals, they would be delighted. So those seats are now gone for the foreseeable future.
So you don't think there's any way that the Liberals could turn this over to sell it out to the public?
Not there. I think there are areas where they can sell it, and Ross is in the Hunter. I think those seats, the lower house seats in the Hunter, the Illawarra, sort of Gippsland and regional Victoria is mainly held by the coalition anyway. There's a few seats in rural and regional Tassie. WA is up for grabs. So, look, in 1 or 2, probably 2 elections' time, it'll be interesting because we'll see what's happened with power prices, we'll see what's happened with the rollout of renewables and technology. I think, look, to use, a sort of Sir Humphrey Appleby, it's a brave decision, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's crazy brave. I think in 2 elections' time, things will be recast and that will be, they've now got a point of differentiation.
Yeah.
But it's also true that, look, John Howard put in the RET, Tony Abbott kept the CEFC and Arena, Scott Morrison adopted Paris, and net zero.
Yeah.
They're not progressive lefties. So this is a significant shift for the coalition.
Yeah.
And that's right, they need to sell it.
Well, and look, I think it is a good shift in policy, and I think you raise a good point now. There is a differentiation, whereas I don't think before that there was a differentiation between what Labor stands for versus what the Liberals stand for. Let's talk about leadership, though, Ross. Look, Susan Lee, this was her first crack at it today, coming up with policy and trying to pitch it to the Australian public. Long time between now and the next election. But do you think that she is indeed the opposition leader that is going to take this policy and sell it between now and the election?
Absolutely. It has to be. Susan's had no clear air from when she got there between people dropping out, things blowing up, everything in the world. We now have a policy to get down this, and we'll be judged. Shadow Minister, if I don't get out there and flog this and do what we've got to tell the story, tell the young people that if they want their Netflix, if they want their data centres, if they want their AI, we have to have reliable power to power these things. If we aren't out there selling it, we all can suffer the knife. You know, I accept that as much as anything. But we have that differentiation, and it is hard work. You can't just, you know, we walked away, I think, from selling our nuclear policy, which was quite good last time. And look at the results. It wasn't supported. I think it was the second most hated thing in the election with $600 billion, which was a lie. We've gone out, we've taken this stand, we have to get out there and sell it, sell the benefits, and they can talk about affordable energy and lowering emissions. I will talk about cheaper, better and fairer energy policy. But if we don't get out there and flog it and point to the failure, this isn't about me and Susan, it isn't about David Littleproud, this is about Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese running a policy that is failing but continually selling like it's improving a lot. No emissions reductions in 3.5 years, thousands of dollars more. We have to do it better.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it'll be good for the coalition to stop talking about themselves and actually talking about policy for the first time and actually holding Labor to account.
Easier said than done, though. And I'm not saying this won't be a change. Yeah, this might be the change required, but what do they say? Politics is about perception and momentum, and Susan Lee, people don't automatically think she's going to make it to the next election.
Do you think she will?
No, I don't. And I don't think it's about Susan Lee. I think whoever leads after 3 terms of government, Brendan Nelson hit the fence. Mark Speakman might not make it to the next election. I don't think it's about Susan Lee. I think whoever gets that poison chalice straight after her, well, actually, this is a bit different because Labor's behaving like a first-term government, but I just don't see how she lasts because you can't... It's really hard to keep the show together when you're in opposition. You can't promise people things, you can't give favours, you can't... I think the internal fractions, it's still... I don't think she makes it, and it's not her fault.
Well, whose fault is it?
Just, they don't have power, and without power, how do you get people to behave?
I think you've got to be a strong leader, though. I think a lot of leadership does... I think this comes down to a lot of leadership, brave decisions and being strong enough to sell it to the public. Look...
well, today was brave, so let's...
look, it was, and I'm happy to give her the benefit of the doubt on this. And look, there is another issue, and I think that the coalition is on a roll now, and I said this earlier. They've dealt with net zero. But now I think it's time to look at migration because Big Australia is getting even bigger. Australia has officially reached the highest net migration of arrivals ever. A total of 468,390 net permanent and long-term arrivals were recorded in the 12 months to September. That's the highest 12-month total on record, 4% above 2024. Ross, I've said this before, this issue of migration was not prosecuted enough at the last 2 elections. I know the coalition tried, but it wasn't enough. And there's always this fear of the R word, racism. Oh, no, we can't discuss it because we're going to be touted as a racist. But do you think that the coalition now needs to look at this? Because there is no doubt it has exacerbated the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis as well. Yeah,
there's no question. And we're out there, and Paul Scar will be doing this, and we're looking at it every day. But I'm out in Shepparton today. I've been out around farms, and I've seen the number of visa workers required on our farms to keep our people fed. The people who were picking apricots today, the people who were working in dairies. There was a Zimbabwean group that came out. They've got an African working there. We need the people coming to Australia that help make Australia a better country. We don't want the freeloaders. We don't want the guys coming for a free ride. But we do need the people that can come here and keep the Australian standard of life going. So we really need to look at that mix. Is what is the mix? What is the number? What is the skills that keeps Australia going better? I go to a mate's factory floor in the Hunter Valley. He builds trusses. And he's had to build 10 homes to bring the visa workers here because Australians don't want to do the work that's required in his office. So, yes, we need migration, but yes, they have to be the ones contributing. And we all joke about the dog groomers or the taekwondo instructors or whatever is on the skilled migration list now. But you have to have that level where they're contributing and not pulling away from the standard of life. They're actually enhancing Australia's standard of life. And there is a level that is, and Scary and the crew will get it together. And I just think we have to have that debate. And as you say, we're not talking about people from here or there or anywhere. We're talking about a mix, and we're not talking about race. We're talking about skills. Well, yeah, I just think that there needs to be a huge scale back. And to an extent, I do also think there needs to be a discussion about the types of people we are bringing into this country as well, Darren. But, I mean, these figures are getting worse for Labor. Why can't they get a hold on this?
Well, I think post-COVID there's been an explosion of people coming into the country. Those figures, I think the official figures then consider whether you stay 12 out of the following 16 months after arrival. So they're raw data rather than official data. But the numbers are up. There's no two ways about
they're
that.
record numbers.
And the 2010 election was a big Australia election. I remember because I worked in Julia Gillard's office at the time. Labor does need to be aware that the perception in the community of too many people coming into Australia, wherever they're from, can be an issue. So they've got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, but they haven't been able to keep an eye on it. And that is the problem. I mean, it's all good for them to say. I think, Labor's argument is, well, look, we haven't had a recession. But the reality is it's these migration figures that are actually propping up. It's like a Ponzi scheme economy, is it not?
It is, but it also provides labour, as Ross points out. That's what provides a lot of labour in the types of jobs that people are less inclined to do, whether it be working in aged care, working on farms and properties. I know that there are incentives within the visas where you have to spend time in rural Australia and all the rest of it, but trying to find the right workforce and people who are willing, able to work in jobs that not everyone wants to do. We've relied on migration to do that for a long, long time, and that won't change.
Well, I think we also need to look at getting some more Aussies into jobs where possible. And look, it obviously comes down to work ethic too, but we've got to really prioritise Aussies. Now, look, young Aussies are becoming increasingly pessimistic about their future. Well, I suppose you can hardly blame them, really. I mean, a Monash University study's found 4 in 5 Aussies aged 18 to 24 think that they will end up worse off than their parents. Now, Ross, I would give a very strong message to Gen Z. If you want to be secure about your future, stop voting for the Greens and Labor. I mean, they're half the problem here. They're voting for socialists all the time. They're obsessed. Look what's happening over in the US. So they voted Mamdani in, for goodness sake. I mean, I do worry about Gen Z. I just think they have this lack of resilience. What do you think?
I think maybe they're a bit more perceptive than we're giving them credit for. In the paper that Paige did with Matt and I, when we're talking about our net zero position, it's showing our standard of living is back to 2011 levels. We could be the first generation that leaves the next generation worse off. I'd be a bit pessimistic too, and I hear about work ethic, I hear about all these things, but we aren't doing the work. We are losing productivity. We are getting lower standard of living. We're having lower wages because of the policy decisions we are making. And I look at my kids, between 18 and 11 back at home, and their potential to buy a new home is basically maybe skipping a generation on inheritance because it is so hard out there to get that start in life. And we are not making it easy. When you have productivity going backwards, labour productivity, everything goes backwards. And that is the extra cost we're not looking here. So, yes, they could do a little bit more. They can actually get up and have a crack, and I get that. But maybe we're doing some wrong things by them too.
Yeah, wasn't that economic roundtable that Labor put on the other month? Wasn't that meant to solve all of the productivity problems that we have in this country?
Can I just say,
absolutely nothing.
My 15-year-old son, I've never seen anyone less likely to leave home.
Really?
Oh, mate, he gets waited on hand and foot. Loves it. He couldn't be happier.
He's happy. But I hear a lot of stories like that, to be honest. I mean, look, I understand it is very, very difficult right now out there, and you would be feeling a little bit flat on yourself. But come on, Gen Z do worry about a lot, don't they?
They do.
It's a bit much.
Look, what you're saying is they get the government they deserve.
Well, yeah, stop voting for Greens and Labor. That's half the problem. As an example, look at Mamdani over in the US.
But I think if the Liberals are going to be competitive in those urban areas, net zero aside, Labor moved on forgiving some HECS debt. There's some, the 5% first home buyers, some stuff on rent assistance. The coalition needs to take that stuff seriously to appeal to young voters, because in the end, their hip pocket is just as valuable to them as it is to the boomers or anybody else. So I think there are challenges ahead, but neither party... I think Labor's done a better job of appealing to those younger voters. And
I agree with that. Well, look at the HECS policy. That did extremely well during the election. There's no doubt about that when it comes to Labor. Now, look, I mentioned at the top of the show, the Prime Minister's got this bizarre obsession with hosting the COP31 climate summit. The PM said he's received a letter from Turkey with that country now digging its heels in. I mean, Ross, it is getting very, very obsessive in my view. This is going to cost upwards of $2 billion. That's the latest statistics. How on earth are we going to afford this? And now we're in this standoff with Turkey.
Well, you know, this is going back to the old Roman times. Give them games to keep them occupied. And I think this is what it is. Nothing more than that. We're going to the Colosseums and lining up the private jets and we can all have a good time. It is a waste of money. If I can help Turkey secure this, let me know how. But it's a joke going forward. We heard last week on Paul's show about the number of people that are going hungry, the number of people needing support even to feed their families. When I was on the supermarket inquiry, we heard about the increase in number of bin diving to get foods and things.
Yeah.
If we want to spend $2 billion in Australia, let's spend it on Australians, not on a festival for Anthony Albanese and Bowen.
Yeah, and the climate crusaders are going to jet in on their private jets, of course, to talk about private jets.
I'm not sure that we want it.
Well, you don't think what you think Labor's having us on?
Not having us on, I think they want to walk both sides of the street. They want Pacific nations to think that we want it, but we're not pushing that hard on Turkey to change their position. And if it doesn't change in the next 7 days or less, it defaults to Bonn in Germany.
Yes,
I'm not sure that we're too concerned if it happens in Bonn.
Right, so this is all just look, Pacific.
We'll take
Pacific
it if we get it, but
we'll take it.
Yeah, but I don't know that we're pushing as hard for it as, for example, Kevin Rudd did to become Secretary General of the UN.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just not convinced that we're pushing that hard for it, and I don't know that we want it that much.
No. Well, look, I do agree with Ross. Anything that we can do to potentially line up Turkey to actually get this, I think that would be absolutely fantastic, because $2 billion...
I don't think Turkey don't want it either. They want something else. There's something they want. No one's giving it
Well,
to
they
them.
gave us an official letter.
It's going to be
Who's
in
drawing
Bonn.
their guns
so
first
it's going to be in Bonn,
this?
and you know who wants it least out of all three is Bonn. They don't want it at all. They're just, oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier in the show, I mean, it's like a standoff now. Who's going to draw their guns first? That's my
last.
question. Or last, maybe. Yeah, look, who knows? It's all a bit... But look, I do agree. Turkey, please, if you're listening, President Erdogan, take it. We don't want it. We can be spending our money on a lot of other things. But anyway...